on the website, zappa.com. But I just want to get some more information about it, Gail. So what is the Australia concert, and why should Zappa fans be particularly interested in this new release?
Well, I wouldn't say they should be particularly interested in this, but I would say that, for us it's very exciting because it's our first release, our first official Vault release, and we created a new label, and it's called Vaulternative Records, and this is our virgin outing.
And now, I was excited. I, of course, one of the first people to enter my credit card into the Barking Pumpkin website. But
I've seen your name.
Yeah, and but then there was then you had a problem, and I don't know what the problem's been about getting it out. It didn't get out by the ship date. And is it a problem that
the
you
Red
haven't had
Sox
enough people
are trying for their 11th straight win? Very impressive.
No,
Hi again, everybody. I'm Dwayne Kuiper with Mike Krukow. And again, it looks like a great evening for a ball game.
Well, it really does, Kuiper, and I'm anxious to get this one started.
And apparently what we
Taking
really
the
want
mound to start the game, Pedro
all
Martinez.
You guys are out there in college land thinking about future careers.
Tonight's American League game is between the Toronto Blue Jays and the Boston Red Sox.
Paper that will is durable and will print properly. That because people are really looking for that, and there isn't anything that the industry can supply on a regular, consistent, reliable basis. So that's something that we should correct, because I know there's a lot of opportunities out there to provide services that will not harm the environment.
And that's a new industry. I was looking at, there's a guest book section on the website, and just in the last month or 2 months, there were people writing in from the Netherlands and Spain and Venezuela and even Iceland, and they were all saying what they thought about the music and the website. And so, I mean, there can't be less than 5,000 orders if this many people around the world is writing in on ad hoc basis.
You'd be surprised. The few that there are loud and adamant. And they sound like a lot more than they actually are.
Okay. I had interviewed Mike Keneally about a year ago. Actually, it's about 6 months ago. And I actually was talking to him about something like this, like a Vault release series. And I compared it to like something that the band King Crimson does, that Robert Fripp does, this like collector's series release to mail order only. And I asked him, judging by the number of Frank Zappa fans out there in the world, that this would be something that would be viable for the trust to do. And he said that there, in his perception, there weren't the legend or the myth of King Crimson had been perpetuated into the 90s heavily because they kept touring, and Robert Fripp put a lot of promotion into it with new fans, and that this might not have been done with Zappa's work as much. So he said that maybe it wasn't sustainable now. Do you think it is? And is this something? I mean, it's a loaded question, but do you think that can we expect more and more of this to happen, or is this like it said like a labor of love? I don't like the sound of that. It should be a labor of love and hopefully some business.
Well, that's a multifaceted question you've asked me there, Kevin.
Right.
Let me see if I can address some of your concerns. First of all, unlike Robert Fripp, I don't know if anybody noticed, Frank died, therefore was not able to tour to, sort of assimilate his work into the marketplace that contains a younger crowd. So we've had to rely heavily on the failure of Ryko Disc to do whatever they can in their puny attempt to staying that catalog out there. But they, for us, it's been very difficult because I don't believe that they are doing a proper and appropriate job for, to promote it. And that's number one. Number two is it is true you do have to have music available. And people are under the impression that there haven't been a number of albums out there, but there actually have. The thing is, we never advertised. If you saw advertising, it was because at some point or another, some of the titles were on record labels like Ryko or EMI in sort of semi-artist deals, I would say, anywhere ranging from an artist deal to a sort of a licensing deal. So that what we did as a mail order company was really act as a backup and support of the catalog that was out there. That has shifted now, and you have to also take into account that people think they can get Frank's music any way they want and anywhere they want. There's so many people out there recording, doing covers, touring it, but they're not paying licensing fees. They're all doing it unofficially, and and then there's also the fact that, MP3 and the Internet is a license to steal, and most people are, not as loyal as they might be. So what I see as the role that we have to do now is to ask every fan, it's always been a choice. No matter how much marketing is done, no one is going to listen to an artist that they don't know anything about or that they're not fond of. You can't make somebody buy music they don't like. So the fans that are out there, like when Frank was a kid, and like all of us were a fan, what we have in common is, we count among our friends people who like some of the same music that we do, that you yourself enjoy. And that's where we've always relied on in a serious way, to promote the catalog. For us, it's always been a labor of love and word of mouth that has made that catalog sustain itself. And I'm hoping that, we'll find those people in the current garrets and attics and wherever they're lurking now, that we found back then, because Frank's audience was always, from 16 to 17-year-old boys all the way up to people in their 80s. And I don't think that's going to change. It'll just be without people understanding that we have, a real catalog that we can offer now, because we've been diligent over the last several years putting a potential release together, that now that they know that it's going to start coming out, I think we'll find those people and they'll find us.
I think every time I've talked about it on there, I've gotten lots of calls of people who are really interested in it. So I definitely think that there's a market out there, and it's just meeting the audience. But this is a particular concert from 1975. Is it the Bongo Fury tour?
Well, it would be unfair for me to tell you prior to the release, but I can say this, because we've tried to keep it a secret, of course, and that's really to prevent bootlegs, even though they can't compete with quality. But we're very proud of it. We think there's some little exciting bits and pieces in there that people are not going to expect. But basically, Alternative Records is going to be a concert series label. And so this is the first in a series of concerts. And we will be shipping, it looks like the end of this month, in about 3 weeks.
Oh. Great. So this is a series. That's the kind of news that I was hoping to pry from you.
Oh, yeah. I should tell you this. We've got a good 20 albums stashed right now that we think are more than mildly awesome.
Okay. So if this is successful and it continues to be successful, would it be a good idea to allow fans to submit requests maybe for certain periods? Like, I know that the Grand Wazoo period and the Petite Wazoo Orchestra period, those never were released on any official release. Now, I've never heard any of those. There were short periods of concerts where you had large orchestras playing those materials. I know on your website you have certain, multiple choice options. Like, even that, for fans to go to the website and say, I'd be interested in hearing this. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but...
Well, first of all, the website's being redone, and it's hopefully going to launch at the same time on the day we ship. And so there'll be a lot more information up there, I think, that people will enjoy knowing about. The other thing is, I'm always interested in what fans want and what they're particularly interested in, and we'd like to accommodate those. But we do, as I say, have a whole series of concerts, some live, some studio, some that people didn't even know we have. That's not to say that we taped everything. Frank did not tape everything. And of course the difference is that, he's not producing it. They're his recordings, and in many cases we do have, albums, or what shall I say, projects that were mixed by Frank, but they never saw the light of day. So even though people might go into a petulant frenzy because they can't get exactly the tour that they wanted to hear, I don't think they're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, I've always been really interested about the Varese album that he had, I don't know if he had supervised it as one of his last projects, but I think that, if that was out in the stores, like some kid would pick that up, that Varese album, because it's supposed to be some weird album associated with Frank, and he'll experience the same type of encounter with Varese's music that Frank did as a kid. So I'm really interested in the status on that, or even if it's going to come out, and other things that are on the shelf, like this Roxy DVD, which blew my mind when I saw that trailer. If there's a timetable on those, or those are things that we're waiting on now to see how the Vault release series is doing.
Well, nothing is dependent on how the Vault series is doing.
Okay.
We're not testing the waters. This is not a petri dish. Basically, what we have,
that is great stuff.
I should preface this by saying, with respect to the Varese project, no one has been aware, except us, that we've been through a lawsuit with two guys who stole the film.
Oh, really?
And it's taken us 8 years to get that film back. And that's the reason why we did not put out the album, because the album, yes, it is finished and it's superb, but my feeling was always that, first of all, I have to say there's no way that we could ever make the dollars on that would ever compensate for what it cost us to do. And I'm not just talking about the lawsuit, which was incredibly expensive, but I am talking about the production itself. There's not, in the sort of market of what people consider profitable, this would probably be at the bottom of the list. And there's not a real keen interest on the part of the industry in any little cranny anywhere to promote this. But for me, it was absolutely something that Frank wanted to do all his life, and one of the things that he did at the end of his life. And it's personally, it's a deeply personal gift that I feel that this album is, to me, first of all, to Frank himself, but also from Frank to me. So I want to see it out, but I want to see it out with the film, because the whole production was done by Frank, and the filming as well, and he gave the instructions to the camera crew of what he wanted covered. And what you'll be able to see is, Frank, as a mature composer, working on the work of his favorite composer, the one he admired the most, and putting it together in the way that he felt Edgar felt his music should have been realized in the first place.
Do you think that one of the things that I was talking with somebody on the show about those early Mothers albums explored a lot of early electronics, just electronic music almost as a pioneer. Some of the sounds in those albums always impressed me. The production, of course, was amazing. I see them pulling that almost directly from Varese, who was an early pioneer in electronic music. I want to then go a little bit further into the thing. I get calls from people, and I don't know what answer to give them, but everybody is talking about, because there's sort of some information on the website about different releases. But as you've said already, there's a lot that goes into the process of releasing this material that people on the outside, including myself, we don't know about it, we don't sympathize it. This is mostly in these timing issues. Can you just give examples of the hassles that you face all the time? I don't want to list a litany, but there's some of the things that maybe people can understand who are listening. That why there isn't a Frank Zappa release coming out every month, and they're angry.
Well, that's going to change, because a lot of it was a lot of the restrictions were part of a holdback on the agreement with Ryko. There were, as a result of that, their interests, and rightly so, were to protect the marketplace for the catalog, which they just spent a lot of money pursuing. So they wanted to limit what we could release into the marketplace, so that it wouldn't compete with them. For myself, I thought that was ludicrous, because I think that everything that comes out helps to promote each individual title. And Ryko, the first release, they rushed to the market to put everything out all over again, and they removed the producer credit, and they removed any contact information with us. I think that, had we been able to put out more product earlier, what they view as product, we would have been able to cross-promote it very effectively. That clause is now not really in force and effect because due to other clauses in the contract, which are not appropriate for me to discuss all those issues with you, but suffice it to say that the door is open now.
The catcher set a target on the corner. The pitcher
That's great news. I'm going to switch gears here now to some other questions. No, not about business so much. I guess we go from business to politics. But you were very interested in politics, and Frank was, and it inspired me to really get interested in politics. And I read a really interesting story about Frank and the Mothers in 1968 in Germany. And they were attacked or mobbed on stage because of their reluctance to support some type of radical German student group. And I don't know if this is a true story or not. I read it in some book. But how tenuous was Frank's relationship to radical groups and causes from the late 60s? Did he consider them all to be disingenuous, or did he sympathize with some of the most democratic causes? I mean, democratic, not the Democratic Party, but the democratic ideal of some of these groups.
First of all, Frank was not in favor of joining clubs.
Sure.
He did admonish people to join a group now before the government disallows your right to assemble. But he was talking about musical groups when he said that. The term radical, as expressed by the press, and especially in those days, usually wavered somewhere between somebody who had very radical ideas that were insupportable in the current situation in society to people who behaved in a radical way, that is, antisocially, or stupidly, you might say. So, yes, the German concert there were a bunch of crazies there who were considered probably radical, but they were behaving abominably. And their idea of a good time was to march on a U.S. government housed facility and destroy it. And they were screaming evolution, or they were screaming revolution, I should say. They were screaming revolution. You should edit this because I didn't mean to say it that way. But they were screaming revolution, revolution, and Frank said evolution. And that, I think, is really the crux of the biscuit, so to speak, that Frank is supporting. He was always in support of freedom, but it is a choice between suffering and joy in many cases, although he didn't characterize it that way. So you can either be a miserable son of a bitch, or you can choose to let go of all the things that keep you distanced from everyone as humanity and everything in the universe.
Yeah.
It is all, aligned. No matter whether no matter what governments come and go, we're all in this together. So you can either choose to recognize that and accept it and actually be grateful for the experience of being alive, or you can choose to be miserable.
A lot of artists, especially today, seem to regard their audiences with contempt, especially when it comes to them as any type of political agents engaging in a democratic society. And you said in another interview, I'm not going to rip off the interview, but you said that the typical Zappa fan was disenfranchised. And you were trying to correct the interviewer when he was trying to make some blanket statement about Zappa fans.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that? Disenfranchised, I'm sure you don't mean that means that I might get my car privileges taken away, my SUV privileges. Can you disenfranchised by whom and what?
By the machinations of a society. You're born into a system you did not invent. You don't necessarily, no one asked you if you think this is okay the way things are working out. And in our society, false values are rewarded. And many of, I feel, and Frank, I'm sure, knew this, that many of his fans, are the people that the music really touched, and it doesn't matter how intellectually developed or articulate you may be. This is across the board. Fans of Frank's tend to be the disenfranchised in the sense that they are separate and apart. They see the ills of society. They see them, and they are the people that many move against.
This batter is nothing special when he's facing a righty on the mound.
To me,
they're just generally more aware
right.
than your average fan who's just looking for music as a lifestyle or background to his activities.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's necessarily true of Frank's fans. I think they are more aware and more conscious.
I think he certainly didn't look down his nose ever at his fans, and he encouraged them to be part of a civil society. And I wish that I had been encouraged to vote when I went to see Metallica as a kid, And it's like somebody who's 18 who's coming to hear like a killer guitar solo or a song about boogers. Next thing they know, they're being confronted with fundamentals of citizenship. How much did Frank believe in this as a cause, and did he see himself as agent of social change, or was he just fighting the good fight?
I think Frank saw himself first as a guy who liked to have a good time and didn't want to interfere with other people's right to have a good time. And he just had perhaps some more exotic ways than the average, or more imaginative ways than the average person, to what it would take to have a really good time. And for him, having a real good time meant being a composer. Now, if you choose that job, which is, he said, was the most unrequired job in America, that really speaks to the society that doesn't appreciate the value of the arts in general and music in particular. It's sitting in judgment over different kinds of music. I don't think it's fair, by the way, to characterize Metallica as irresponsible in not showing up these bills. The fact that they stood up there on that stage and they did what they did is an important thing to take notice of, because they were true to what they believed was their right to freedom of expression. And they went out there balls to the wall and delivered. So I wouldn't say that they were the bad guys.
True.
Compared to Frank.
He's always a threat to steal base.
I know I got a tendency for lengthy questions, but they all involve elaborate structures that I compose. This is a big question. If you believe what some people say about the 1960s today, it was either the beginning of the end of moral society, as argued by Gingrich and William Bennett and Robert Bork, and was the source of all today's problems, on one hand, or you hear it argued as the expression of some individualist ideal. It's like the breaking of social fetters and transporting oneself to some nether region. But this myth, it seems to have been sold to us, and it's still sold to us as a reason for consuming anything, to express ourselves through our wallet, as opposed to any political forms of dissent outside of, buying the product that rebels the most. And Frank's records from that period and for the rest of his career seem to burst both those bubbles at the same time. Was it just that Frank was skeptical of any overarching ideological claims, any claims to a whole worldview, or did he have a vision himself that was different than the two I mentioned? Another big one.
Well, first of all, you're spouting doctrine that people have been able to make a living off of for a long time.
Sure.
So let's talk about that let's just put that aside and say, that's commercial frogwash. Okay? And those are theories that people can buy into or not. There are always in every society, luckily for us, people who are born free, so to speak. And I think Frank is certainly one of those people. I think there are other people around, and you can usually recognize them by the hugeness of their sense of humor, because that's a perspective that they came into the world with in many cases. You can't learn that stuff without letting go of everything you know. Does that help you, Kevin?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great.
And when people have that, that's the perspective. They just say what they feel, and they're deadly honest about it, and so it's, what they say rings true.
And he saw himself as an equal opportunity offender of all things sanctimonious on either side.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you because my dog is barking.
Yeah, sure. Bark, bark. He saw himself as an equal opportunity offender. Like anybody who came up, it doesn't matter what side they're on, they were probably both had the equal chance of getting something said about them by Frank, I think.
I think that Frank saw himself as an equal opportunity employer, where he could use anything as a tool for any purpose whatsoever. Anything or anyone. It's just, he was the guy who pointed the stick at people who, well, actually I would say this. Frank's job was probably to tickle you, and if he could tickle you to death, that would be great. For him, what a great way to die. But the point that I'm really making is that he was really against, if anything, people who took themselves seriously.
Would I'm really interested in, I don't know if there's a lot about it, about how it seems to me that the dealings that he had with record labels in the 60s, 70s, and 80s were, there were massive fights and pioneering efforts on independent labels in general. Like a lot of the independent labels from the 50s, 60s are jazz or R&B labels, and not so much rock labels. And it seems like the steps that he took, especially in the early 70s with Bizarre Straight, and then the break with Warner Brothers, were huge steps for as an example to other artists. How difficult was it, like those periods? Was it just like a huge weight bearing down on him when he was on Bizarre Straight? Was it just a huge hassle?
Yeah, I don't think that people set themselves up to go out and be champions. They see a job. It's like, when you're a kid, if you were lucky and you had a mom who once in a while came up with something brilliant, like if you see a mess, clean it up, don't wait for somebody else who might have done it to do it. It's kind of like that, take responsibility. And Frank, he... He didn't go out there to defend artists. That wasn't, he wanted to earn a living as a composer. He didn't want people messing with his musical content and his ideas and his ability to express those and get those out there into the world, because he figured, if I think this is funny, for example, not outside of a musical context, if I think this is funny and I can get this out there and somebody else thinks it's funny, I mean, sooner or later there's a possibility you can get in the same room with a whole lot of people to think that stuff is funny, and that would be fun. Plus you could earn a living at it.
Yeah.
So yes, in answer to your question, it was huge struggles, and most of this stuff happened in self-defense to protect your rights, to protect your ability to make your own decisions and control what you do, and not be pushed around by these guys, these characters that think they're running the world through music. I mean, if you look around you in every major music capital, anywhere in the world, you will see giant buildings that are not built by artists. They're built by record companies. And they're filled with guys in leather jackets who, purport to make the decisions, business decisions. But there are not monuments like that to any artist anywhere.
Yeah. Do you think that today, comparing the avenues that Frank took to get his music to the public, it would be quite different today, or is the situation the same today? Or is it worse?
I'm sorry?
The situation today would be worse or the same as, would he even take the same avenues, let's say today? I mean, would he even have a chance to go through a major label? Or would he have to stop?
But his desire was not to be on a major label. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who aspire to be on a major label. You cannot take those people seriously as musical artists because their aspirations are misplaced.
Right, that's a great quote. I'm going to switch a little bit to your political activities. And I know you met, and you were a White House coffee guest. And you met, I just picked this up, you met Bill Clinton and Al Gore separately about a Department of Culture. And as I guess you were talking about this a little bit earlier.
It was in the same meeting.
Oh, the same meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, wow. I just have a question, though. Is there something wrong with the picture? I mean, when one has to give $100,000 to the Democrats just to pitch an idea about a Ministry of Culture?
Well, to be fair, really fair, you guys, I didn't write a check so I could get into the same room to say those things. I had no idea that I would ever be invited anywhere, let alone to the White House. I just had discretionary money, after all the dust settled and the deal was done with Ryko that I'd never, ever enjoyed in my life. We've always worked, and all the money that we made, we put back into the business. And for a brief time there, I had money that I could, give away. And I chose to give, to make donations on behalf of all the people out there, and primarily women, who would never have a chance to make their dollars count. And I felt, if I do this, then I get to be in the room and say the things that I want to say to the other people who are powerful, who also give donations. I never dreamt that I was going to be in the same room with the President of the United States. That wasn't the point. Yeah. But having got there were all these people pitching, and I had no idea. For me, it was like, what do you do when you get there, I mean, I was just as interested in what kind of china they might have and how they were going to manage it, whether they was going to be served to them or they were going to have to pick up their own cup and walk from the table and sit down, or what. It was like, oh, what's going to happen? Like, what's the protocol? And that sort of thing. And it turns out that there was all these men in the room, and there was also one other woman.
Every day can't be Christmas.
And they started talking about their particular agendas and what was important to them, and they were so obviously pitching. So I thought, well, what's important to me? To the people that I think are disenfranchised. How about a Department of Culture? I mean, I said I would rather we could have a Department of Humor, but that'll never happen. Let's have a Department of Culture, because at the time, the NEA was in danger of losing all its funds, as it perennially is, and because of Republican pressures and, questions and that sort of thing. And so that seems to be an important issue. But that's not the only thing that, I was interested in. I was also interested, although I didn't necessarily bring it up then, in intellectual property rights. Because for me, our two greatest exports, and I'm, paraphrasing Frank, who said our greatest export is democracy. But for me, the second greatest export is culture, and that's all about intellectual property.
So you're talking about the extension of intellectual property rights to involving those in trade agreements and things like that?
Well, I'm talking about, essentially, but not not over all the general idea of pushing the length of years that they would be honored and having a more continuing to push the envelope for what should be included and what the protections would be and how they would be, how those protections would work.
So, for example, I mean,
it's no good saying you have a law against something if you can't,
I mean,
there's no process by which you could defend it.
Yeah, you'd rather have, and for at least for copyright, you'd rather have the money going to the artist than to the record label, who reaps the huge.
No, that's not the issue. I want other countries to recognize that if you rip off somebody's song in another country, it is not something that is difficult to prove the value of how you've been wronged.
Sure. I mean, in artistic content, that's obviously the priority. But for something like, I don't know, Microsoft Windows, where, I mean, South Africa has to use a bunch of computers and they can't afford to buy a new a Windows software for each one, and we won't let them buy them from anybody else except for Microsoft. And there's problems inherent in that relationship in some of those technology copyrights. I'm just being devil's advocate.
Well, I think there's a solution, but that again. Go to your dictionary and, look up what political means. It doesn't, we use that as a sort of generic term to include everything that's bad about politics, but politic, the word politic itself, look that up because, that's in that, there is always going to be a solution for these kinds of issues that you're talking about in terms of trade. I mean, basically, the laws need to account for the fact that you can take advantage of a market because the market is naive, and that's an unfair business practice. It's like if you knew something, if you were negotiating with somebody and you knew something they didn't know, and you used that to your advantage. That's not fair.
And here comes the hook.
Simple.
They're going to the pen.
I guess this goes back, especially Republicans canceling or attacking the NEA constantly. Maybe some people out there listening might think it odd that you're sitting there talking about revitalizing American culture with the husband of the woman who was seen as a leader of cultural wars in the 1980s. I know you're actually pretty close with the Gores.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not a paradox?
No, because I think that anyone who's ever had a conflict with someone that they have eventually sat down and talked to that person, or especially in a situation where you don't know that person and then you meet them, you find out that they're reasonable people, and it's possible to have an exchange and still have very different ideas, a very different worldview. And nothing has probably changed about me, and probably, I would say, Tipper Gore has had her eyes open through the experience of having to take that head on, and people talking to her about her issues. I think she's learned a great deal from that experience.
Out of the zone, that's a ball.
Which doesn't necessarily mean that she doesn't have a position to defend. I'm not saying that. She has her own point of view, and we'll probably hear a lot more about it. But I think that that was not about the Gores, and it was not about Tipper Gore and Frank Zappa. It was about censorship.
In general,
And the record companies have succeeded. I mean, all those people on all those committees have actually succeeded against what Frank was trying to prevent. And they have made the marketplace a field of mass mediocrity where every package looks the same.
Jackson will hit next.
So this discretionary money that you were sort of donating, I took a look at some of the other people that you donated to, and it's good all spread around the Democratic Party. It's Paul Wellstone, Ted Kennedy, Maxine Waters, Pat Leahy, and Hillary Clinton, among others. I'm a amateur journalist, not a rock journalist, though. So this was a shift, because all I could find from Frank was like a donation to Howard Berman, who's a rep out there in California, way back in like '89. I guess the big question here, it goes back.
As I said, we didn't have discretionary income.
Right. No, totally. I think the good question here is that why donate so much to political candidates instead of, say, like a group which lobbies Congress to get like a public funding for elections, which would then allow the disenfranchised to all have a lot more of a say in elections and in policy?
Well, there are people. Okay, that's a good question. It's a fair question, but here's the deal. The people that really get the job done, it goes back to looking up the word politic. You look at the people that are running for Congress. There's really no incentive to run for Congress if you're a do-gooder, if you're a goody-two-shoes sort of person who believes, who's a true patriot, who wants to work for the good of the people. Okay, so I think we should support those people that fall into that category, that are willing to put themselves on the line out there and go and fight for us every single day of their lives. You know, and that is the reason.
So you're not just saying, I mean, you're trying to push the Democratic Party in a certain direction with your donations? I mean, you're trying to get...
No, I don't. It doesn't come attached to anything. And, you know, if you could give money to someone who would do what you asked them to do, that person should not be elected to office.
But that,
unless it's something that was consistent with their will in the first place.
Sure. So you don't have to answer this question, but do you give donations to then other groups maybe that are working, not political candidates, but action groups or NGOs that try to work for these things as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's something that that's private donation, so I couldn't dig that up. So that answers my question about that.
Well, and I've supported, films. I've supported all kinds of things that I've been able to, for like, $200 to $1,000 here and there, different things. When I could, I can't always do that. And, MP3 certainly has put a dent in my ability to do that. And the internet, the fact that being able to download music has really curtailed my... and I don't think that that's an accident, because it's hit the record industry very hard. And the government's failure to respond adequately to again, intellectual property rights is part of that.
So you think that,
It's not for nothing that they do not pursue that, because it shuts down a lot of artists who are the only people who are really, saying what's on their mind.
So you don't think that maybe the peer-to-peer music trading has ever helped independent artists? Or it doesn't help it at all? Or it's just the gains are not as much as the losses?
Well, what do you mean by that?
I mean, like somebody will download, Yellow Snow, and then will go and buy 10 Frank Zappa albums as a result.
You can't guarantee that.
No, of course you can't guarantee that.
And who wants to police that nonsense?
Exactly, but it's seeming pretty hard to shut down these newer systems of music trading that are popping up. Like on a college campus like this one, and it takes up a huge amount of just their internet use. So I don't know if this is a system that can be seen as like 100% viable anymore. The system of...
Well, on the one hand, it's unfortunate that people are stealing music and that there's such rampant dishonesty. That's really the issue. And that goes to your basic education. When the Republicans moved years ago to make the center of the universe reading, writing, and arithmetic, the 3 R's, which they had control of the public school system for a long time. That meant that, they took the arts, and more importantly, they took civics out of education. They were not, there was, less focus on that. So consequently, you have people who are very unaware of the artistry involved in the world around them, and they do not know what their responsibilities are or their rights as citizens. So, they've been successful, and because of that, I think, you have a society that is only interested in satisfying their immediate needs. If you can steal it, then by all means do. That's too bad.
Yeah, a lot of that's going on these days, it seems.
The good news, though, is that, those kinds of files are limited in terms of the music content. They may work fine for Michael Jackson, but they're not going to get you anywhere with Frank Zappa recording.
Right. Exactly. I think that I think that the diversity of somebody like Zappa will ensure that people will always be interested in a lot of his work, and it's not, nothing gets repeated. All right, this is my last political question. Then we're going to get to some listener questions that I got emailed. But you got people like Bono touring Africa with Treasury Secretary Paul O'Neill, and he's trying to convince him that certain U.S. policies are hurting Africa and keeping their countries in poverty and debt, and that there are clear policy changes the U.S. could embark on that would really change the situation over there. I mean, is this the role for a musical celebrity? I mean, thousands of protesters gathering outside the International Monetary Fund every meetings every year for the past 5 years. They've been yelling and screaming, and they haven't been able to change his mind. And like, can a rock star do this? And this is the I know rock star is not the question for you, but is this the way to affect policy in the government?
First of all, I don't think that because someone is a rock star, it's a hindrance to their ability to feel compassion and to be moved to do whatever it takes to make a difference, given that they have the press at their feet and access to the media as well as to the public through their own work and through people hanging on what they say. And if you're an articulate person, then why wouldn't you do that if you felt compelled to do that? I think his, it's likely that his interest is absolutely genuine, but it's also likely that he's allowing himself to be used as well.
That's the fear, I think.
But it doesn't change the fact that, the one good bit of news is that he's leveling the playing field so that you will not continue to ask the question, possibly, should a rock star do this? Because first and foremost, he's a human being.
Right. Okay, so I've been getting some questions for you from listeners, and I picked some of them that seem most interesting. And, WNUR is an excellent radio station other than the Frank Zappa Show. It plays a lot of great and interesting music that introduces people to all kinds of different musicians. So this is a question that would be good for any private station. But did Frank ever meet John Cage? And the listener goes on, he says, it seems that while he spoke of Velez and Boulez, Bayburn, etc., that Cage figured to some part of his approach to music. And go from there.
I don't think that he met John Cage other than between his ears.
But do you think it was a big influence?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think that he credits John Cage with inventing improvisation.
Because Cage actually spoke out against improvisation.
Well,
oddly enough, but people always say that he didn't.
Well, it depends. I haven't seen a statement that John Cage made about that, but I don't think that he. They were probably talking about the two of them, Frank and Cage, were probably talking about two separate types of improvisation. The one that John Cage invented versus the one that he abhorred.
Yeah.
which is pretty much why you invent something. It's because you hate the way something is.
After 8.5, the score is 2-0.
The next question is Frank Zappa's mustache copyrighted?
Right-handed hitters can have trouble picking up his
It's trademarked.
It's trademarked. Okay. So if I grew one, would I have to email you?
I hope you would.
Okay. My mustache. This is my curse. My curse.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
This is my curse that my mustache does not grow in. So I can never have a Frank Zappa mustache. It's really, I've gotten over it now, but for a while it was really getting to me. I guess, speaking of copyrights, and we were talking about it earlier, I guess, but there's a situation going on right now with Internet radio, and the Librarian of Congress has imposed rates on Internet radio webcasting required by the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And it would... like our radio station and other independent and non-commercial radio stations, they pay royalty fees to BMI and ASCAP, and I'm sure you guys get 30 cents from my show a year, something like that. But this rate that they're imposing is a flat fee that doesn't have anything to do with station revenue, and it's a really, I don't know if you know about it, but people who've been listening to my show are really worried because we might have to shut down our webcasting stream so that people can't listen to the Frank Zappa show in other states. And I don't know if you know about it. I thought you might have.
Well, I think that is, every age has, its form of censorship. don't, I sympathize because that's what this is. There's no rhyme or reason for a law that would put you out of business, which is really the intention.
Right, that is the intention. Yeah.
You know, that's the intention. Hi, guys, wake up. Yeah, save your radio station. Run pledges to make that be.
Right. I mean,
that's your option.
Sure.
And then the public becomes aware. Don't keep it a secret.
I wholeheartedly agree. We've been railing about it on the air for a long time, but
yeah, but move it. Just move something. I mean, people.
Well, Michael Powell.
You don't know what you're going to miss until it's gone,
right.
And you don't want to be there. Take it from me. I know what's gone and what I missed, and I'm here to tell you that's not the greatest thing in the world that can be taken away from you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the next question is that why has the the A&E Zappa biography only been shown once? Actually, that was the question. I don't know if it might have been shown more than once or just it's not shown anymore.
Couldn't tell you, except that they probably looked up in their contract and found out that I own it, and they didn't account to me.
Oh, okay.
But there's no action being taken. But that show was actually made by a television show in Britain called Late Night.
Oh.
And apparently it was licensed or sold in that format to A&E, who then chopped it up and insinuated Peter Graves, And so that's the version that you see in America. But fear not. I'm happy to tell you that sometime late next year, there's going to be a really wonderful documentary made by this guy named Frank Sheffer from Holland, who has had the pleasure of working with a great many fabulous composers in his life. And he is working on one, Frank, right now. The working title is the Edgar Varese quote. Present-day composer refuses to die.
That's good. Is that to be like a theater release documentary?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do. It's not your average, it's not your typical biopic or anything like that. It's really about Frank as a composer. Hello?
Yeah, it's not. Hopefully, it's not a biopic, right? It's not.
No, it's not a biopic.
Okay.
It's about Frank as a composer.
And is there a chance that the Roxy concerts will be shown in the theaters?
The Roxy concert, that is my idea of a real good time. I want to do that very much. I want to tour the Roxy film. And while the film is not brilliantly shot, the music is so spectacular.
Sure.
So everybody will be happy to know that I do want to tour that film, and eventually there will be a DVD, and eventually there will also be a second Roxy album.
Oh, wow. Great. Now, a few shows back, I played some copies of a radio show from 1969 where Frank was on the air on some radio station in New York, and he was spinning old R&B records, his own collection. And
I vaguely recall that.
Yeah, and it was great. I came by this from an old DJ here, and he's like, I got this thing, I think you should have it. So I played on the air, and it was big, long, I took 3 shows, and people were calling, and they were going crazy. It was great. And